Sean Diddy Combs was convicted on 2 federal charges, each carrying up to 10 years in prison. But now, in a twist maybe no one saw coming, reports say President Donald Trump's team has been in talks with Diddy's lawyers about a possible presidential pardon. Could Trump really set Diddy free? Is this justice, politics, maybe payback? Oh, and by the way, Combs' team just filed papers to have his conviction thrown out and that he be granted a new trial, making a lot of arguments, including that he's protected by the...
No one saw it coming. Not the press, not the prosecutors, not even Diddy's own legal team. After weeks of silence and chaos, courtrooms and cuffs, a new name suddenly entered the equation. And not just any name, Donald Trump.
This whole criminal trial, 7 weeks of testimony and a verdict that ended in Sean Diddy Combs' conviction on 2 federal sex crimes charges. Could he be pardoned by the President of the United States? You know, that is a question that came up a lot when we were doing the live streams of the Diddy trial every day on YouTube. I never really considered it as a real possibility, but I'll tell you what, now, based on current reporting, we may have to take this seriously. Oh, and in terms of relief for Diddy, we also have to get into his defense team's new memo that they filed arguing that his conviction should be thrown out, or at the very least, he should get a new trial. We're going to talk about that too. And by the way, let me tell you, we have an amazing guest who I'm going to be bringing on in a little bit, somebody who actually helped secure federal pardons for his clients, including from President Trump, and is an expert in criminal law, has been following this case from the very beginning. I'm going to bring him on in a little bit. But why do I say that we have to take pardons seriously now? Why? Well, TMZ has reported that President Donald Trump's administration has been talking to Diddy's legal team about a potential pardon, a forgiveness for a federal crime. It's enshrined in the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. And according to TMZ, his decision to pardon Diddy may be determined based on if Judge Arun Subramanian grants Diddy bail, which, by the way, we dedicated a whole sidebar to the other day. His team just filed a brand new letter with the court asking for him to be released. I broke it down, discussed all those arguments. But TMZ also has reported that the pardon decision could also come down to how Diddy is ultimately sentenced on October 3rd. And remember, he was acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking, but he was found guilty of the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, the Mann Act violations, namely transporting his exes, Jane and Cassie Ventura Fine, and men across state lines for the purposes of sex work. Each charge carries up to 10 years in prison, although I'll tell you, in a prior filing, the government was looking at roughly 4 to 5 year prison sentence. Mind you, this is before a pre-sentencing report has been prepared for the court, which does a full background check and analysis of Diddy's life and crimes. Now, the defense would definitely love time served and he gets out, or 21 to 27 months. And remember, at the time of sentencing, he'll have been locked up for a full year, so he'll get credit for that. And the judge has discretion here because there's no mandatory minimum when it comes to these charges. But anyway, as you know, we have been following this Diddy story.
Yes, the former president, the same man who once sat in the highest office in America, now stepping directly into the mess that has consumed Sean Diddy Combs. And when the news broke, it didn't just ripple, it detonated. In the middle of a legal firestorm, with Diddy already found guilty on charges that rocked the industry, speculation had been swirling about appeals, delays, even retrials. But no one, absolutely no one, expected that Donald Trump would be the one trying to pull Diddy out of the flames. It started as a whisper, an anonymous source, a private meeting, some quiet phone calls. But within 24 hours, the headlines were everywhere. Trump pressures state officials on Diddy's sentencing. Former president intervenes in high-profile music mogul case. Donald Trump and Diddy. Courtroom chaos turns political.
President Trump was asked about this a few months ago before the verdict. This was back in May. And he said when asked about a pardon for Diddy, I would certainly look at the facts. If I think somebody was mistreated, whether they like me or don't like me, it wouldn't have any impact on me. He used to really like me a lot, but I think when I ran for politics, that relationship busted up from what I read. I don't know, he didn't tell me that, but I'd read some little bit nasty statements in the paper all of a sudden. And Diddy had been photographed with Trump over the years. There was some sort of relationship there. President Trump even called him a good friend on a 2012 episode of his TV show The Apprentice. The problem is, some comments Diddy made about Trump in recent years as Diddy really entered the political realm. There's a video where he's speaking to radio host Charlemagne saying, if Trump gets elected, I really do believe in my heart there'll be a race war. In another video on Revolt, he says white men like Trump need to be banished. And by the way, you know who's not letting anyone forget this? Combs' rival 50 Cent. Took to social media recently, wrote, see, Trump don't like S like this, buddy. You run your mouth too much. And Donald doesn't take well to disrespect and doesn't forget who chooses to go against him. While working tirelessly to make America great again, there is no room for distraction. He would consider pardoning anyone who is being mistreated, not Puff Daddy. And let me tell you, the idea of Trump pardoning Diddy is not getting a ton of love out there. Conservative commentator Megyn Kelly posted on X, Trump should not pardon Diddy. He doesn't deserve it. He's a Trump hater. He's a woman abuser. MAGA is already upset over elites seeming to cover for each other. This would not help. GOP struggling with young female voters, most of whom will hate a Diddy pardon. And then you just had other random accounts like America First. What? He's actually considering this? Diddy is a depraved, abusive, sexual deviant who should be spending the rest of his life in prison. If Trump pardons him, he will get absolutely crushed. Who is advising him lately? It's looking like straight up sabotage at this point. There were other accounts that were not in favor of it, although there was this account. Milo posted on X, Trump has no choice but to pardon Diddy after the government, led by James Comey's daughter Maureen, simply lost interest in Diddy's guilt the moment they secured his tapes incriminating powerful Democrats. The prosecution was a shambles. The trial was a farce. Now, I want to talk about if this is really going to happen, how it would happen. Also, if it really depends on bail and sentencing, then what are we talking about? And I have somebody who not only has been following the Diddy case from the very beginning, not only is a renowned criminal defense attorney, but actually has obtained federal pardons from the president, including from Donald Trump. By the way, for his clients Kodak Black and Lil Wayne, those were maybe the most notable. I'm joined by Bradford Cohen. Bradford, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Now, before I even get into the pardon, okay, there was a bit of breaking news before we were going to come on. This is what I want to get your opinion on first. So Combs' defense team filed a memo in support of a motion for judgment of acquittal, or in the alternative, a motion for a new trial. And basically, I know you read through it, but basically the evidence, they would say, is insufficient to sustain that conviction. Their main arguments is really echoing what we've talked about a little bit when it came to the bail analysis, but that his prosecution, his conviction on these Mann Act prostitution charges is so unique. He wasn't profiting off of this business. All consenting adults were involved. The jury didn't find that there was any sex trafficking. They argued this isn't even prostitution per se, it's voyeurism, that the intent wasn't for people to travel for sex for money, but he paid them for their time. Everybody was having a good time. He makes a First Amendment argument that the freak-offs and the hotel nights were performances that were typically videotaped so they could watch them later on. It's just amateur pornography. And then finally makes the argument that he was prejudiced because of all the other evidence that came in to prove RICO or sex trafficking, and would have never came in if he was merely being prosecuted for prostitution, particularly the Intercontinental Hotel footage of him purporting to beat up Cassie Ventura Fine. And he says, at the very least, he needs...
The courtroom was already a circus, but this was something else entirely. People thought it was a joke, but then the statement came. A message straight from Trump's camp, public, bold, defiant. Sean Combs has been a powerful voice in music, business, and culture. He deserves fair treatment, not political persecution. I am monitoring this case closely. And just like that, the legal proceedings turned into a battlefield for influence. What had been a closed-door reckoning became a national headline with global stakes. Inside the courtroom, reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage. The prosecution was furious. The victims' advocates were stunned. Even the judge paused proceedings briefly to address what they called outside interference. But the damage was already done. Suddenly, the question wasn't just how long he would serve. The question was, would he serve at all? Behind the scenes, Diddy's team scrambled to leverage the moment.
You think this is a successful argument?
Thank you. I don't know if it's going to be successful in the judgment of acquittal. I think the argument is interesting because everyone agrees he might be the only person in custody right now that has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. The Mann Act, and it gives a nice history of the Mann Act, and a lot of people don't understand what the Mann Act is, but the Mann Act was enacted because of a racist motivation that white women were being recruited by people of color to go across state lines and make money. So actually pimping those women across state lines and making money off of their sexual exploits. Obviously, that's not the case here. It's used so infrequently, it might have been a handful of people were actually charged with the Mann Act. No one in custody currently has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. So it's an interesting argument to say, hey, listen, this Mann Act, the original reason for it was racist. The original way that it was applied was racist. The way it's applied here is incorrect because he was not making any money from quote unquote pimping or getting these women across or men getting them across state lines. None of that was being done. This was all being done for entertainment purposes. So it's an interesting argument. I don't think this judge buys it. It might be interesting on an appeal, but I don't think the judge is going to give him a judgment of acquittal on those two counts based on the argument. Now, the more interesting argument to me, and it's their last argument for new trial, is that, listen, if you were just going to charge him with these two counts, which I originally said when I looked at all the evidence, and don't forget, I was getting calls during this trial from individuals that were telling me, hey, I have information that exonerates what they're saying against Sean Combs, essentially saying that Cassie and others were participating more than just having sex in a room. They were participating more than that. They were paying people. They were hiring people. They were sending me pictures even when Diddy wasn't around. They were asking me to come over even when Diddy wasn't around. These are what these witnesses were telling me, which is really Brady evidence. And I don't know if that was ever turned over. But the more interesting argument is that all these counts were charged. The only thing he was convicted of were the Mann Acts. And he probably wouldn't have been convicted of these Mann Acts, but for all this other stuff that came in to try and prove these counts that they could not prove and did not have a basis for bringing.
Let me just challenge you on that, because this is a jury who didn't find that there was sex trafficking. And I can't confirm that they found him guilty of the Mann Act because of the hotel video or anything else. I mean, it seems to me that they might have convicted him on that based on the travel records, the payment receipts, all about that. Not even necessarily allegations of violence. I mean, do you think that it was because of, let's say, the Intercontinental Hotel video that he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution? It always felt to me that they proved that charge based purely on, the documents.
Well, I always feel like during a trial, whenever you get a guilty verdict on one of the counts or two of the counts out of 6 or 7, you think to yourself, is it because of these other things that they brought up, how bad he is?
Emergency filings, bail requests, claims of constitutional violations. One of his lawyers even floated the phrase presidential protection, like this was some 90s thriller playing out in real life. The public was split. Some saw it as a final power move by a fallen icon, calling in a favor from someone who owed him one. Others saw it as blatant corruption, a desperate attempt by two men used to getting their way. But did he? He played it quiet. No tweets, no videos, no statements. Just a look on his face when he arrived in court that said everything. Calm, calculated, like he knew something no one else did. And maybe he did. The courtroom tension hit a boiling point. Reporters jammed the aisles, security tripled, protesters gathered outside holding signs, some demanding justice, others calling the trial a political hit job. But the one question on every single person's mind was simple: why was Donald Trump involved? And then it dropped. A leaked document. A letter signed by Trump's legal advisory team, sent directly to the governor's office calling for what they called a full review of the sentencing process.